Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to Gringa Spanish. So here's the thing. We can do dialogues all day long, and that is going to increase your exposure to sentences, to words, to examples, common situations, things like that. But at some point, we have to talk about grammar. And you could probably learn pretty well by just increasing your knowledge, listening to examples, watching TV, stuff like that. But that being said, it will end up being easier in the long run if you take some time to learn the actual rules. And we're just going to go over the most important ones. I promise it's easier than it sounds. This episode is going to be Grammar Lesson 1 about conjugating regular verbs, a little introduction about what that means, super simple, and then we're going to talk about one type of verb in Spanish, those ending in AR. Okay? What does it mean to conjugate verbs? So when you have the infinitive form of a verb, it's basically the pure version. It doesn't tell you who's doing it or when they're doing it. In English, the infinitive version is always two words, so you don't really think of it as one word, but it kind of is. It is the infinitive form of the verb, even though it is two words in English. In English, it's to whatever. So we have our examples over here on the left. The infinitive form would be to run, to swim, to drink. It's talking about the verb. It doesn't tell you who's doing it or when they're doing it. The conjugated form tells you who is doing it and when they're doing it. So we're just going to use the example of the present tense in the I form here. So English, to run conjugated becomes I run. To swim becomes I swim. He swims. You swim. In English, it's two different words. You just tag on who's doing it to the present tense form most of the time. You can already see that in English, the third person, which is he or she, already doesn't quite follow that rule, right? I run would be first person. I is called first person in grammar. You run. You is called second person in grammar. Run stays the same. I run, you run. But when you get to third person, which is he or she runs, you can already see that the verb has changed. We added an S to the end. Now in English, you learned this by just being exposed to English since you were a kid, so you don't even think about that. I would say it's easier in Spanish than it is in English. So I'm going to teach you how to conjugate verbs in the present tense in Spanish. So going over the examples of the infinitive in Spanish, here are two examples, the same one as above. Correr means to run. I run becomes corro. It tells you who did it and when they're doing it. Nadar becomes nado. Okay, now let's actually talk about the different forms of the present tense. We talked about it a little bit already, but I want to formalize it for you. First person means me. Whenever I'm using a verb that I'm doing, I'm using that verb in first person. I whatever. Second person is you. When you're talking about someone else to them, that's called second person. You run, you write, you swim, you jump. Second person form of the verb. Third person is when you're talking about somebody who is not in the conversation. He runs, he writes, he jumps, he swims. We run, we write, we jump, we swim. I don't know what that's technically called. I'm not going to look it up. They run, they write, they swim. These are the forms that you need to think about and that we're going to go over in Spanish. When you know these ones, you know everything. Now there's a couple additional things in Spanish that we're going to talk about, but we're going to take it slow and it's going to be okay. And then once you know this grammar, the dialogues are going to make much more sense. And you won't just be depending on exposure. That I think will actually take you much longer, as I said. So now here's something that's going to be a little scary for you. In any language, well, at least in English and Spanish, I know for sure, there are things called regular verbs, and there are things called irregular verbs. Regular verbs, once you know the rules, you can conjugate them, no problems, no questions asked. Irregular verbs are verbs that are rogue. They don't follow the rules. So how do you know if a verb is irregular or not? The hard answer is you don't. That you have to learn by knowing which ones they are and by exposure. Okay, you might say, how do I conjugate them? Is there at least rules for the irregular ones? No. Some of them follow certain patterns, but some of them don't follow any pattern. That being said, take a step back and calm down. You can learn Spanish. The really, really good thing about conjugating irregular verbs is they tend to be the really, really common ones. And that might sound bad to you at first, but let me tell you what that does. Because you're exposed to them so often, you're going to know exactly which ones they are. And then not only that, but the irregular verbs tend to sound really, really weird if you try to use the regular rules with them. You'll see what I mean. So here are some examples of common regular verbs. Escribir, that means to write. Nadar, that means to swim. Correr, that means to run. Vivir, that means to live. So how do you recognize a verb in Spanish? You might already have a clue. They all end in R. And as I mentioned before, there is a form of verb in Spanish that ends in AR. So that kind of gives you a clue to what the other forms of the infinitive verbs look like. There's AR verbs, there's ER verbs, and there is IR verbs. So if you're looking at a word that you don't know, and it ends in AR, ER, or IR, there is a pretty good chance that that is a verb in the infinitive form. Now these are the three, I would say the three most common irregular verbs. We'll obviously go over more later, but just to give you three big examples right off the bat. Ir means to go. Ser, that's to be. And estar is also to be. Ser is used for permanent traits. Estar is used for temporary traits. We'll go over that more at some point too. And I have one more big suggestion for you guys. Conjugation.org is a really, really good website that will conjugate any Spanish verb for you. You just type in the infinitive and it will tell you all of the different conjugated versions of that verb. So if you're learning and you don't know if a verb is regular or irregular, or you're forgetting the rules, or you just need to look at it, go to conjugation.org, type in your verbs, and it'll give you a table. I have never had a word that wasn't on that website. Okay, so now that we've given you an introduction to what conjugation means and to what Spanish verbs look like, let's talk about how to conjugate Spanish verbs that end in AR. So in this column, if you're driving, don't worry about it, we're going to talk about it. In this column, you'll see what the AR changes to when you conjugate the verb in the present tense. The AR changes to an O for the first person or yo form. The AR changes to an AS for the tu form, the you form, the second person form. The AR just changes to an A for the él or usted form, the third person form. Now, here's the first little difference that I kind of hinted at earlier. In Spanish, to say usted, which is the polite form of the second person, tú, you always use the third person form. So you can kind of think about it. I think in my experience, they kind of did this sometimes in the olden days, maybe. I can picture a maid going up to a queen, and instead of saying, "Your Majesty, you should drink your tea," she says, "Her Majesty should drink her tea." So to be extra polite, she's talking in the third person. Think of it the same way here. Another way of addressing a person very politely is to use the usted version, and when conjugating verbs, you will use the same form as the third person form. Nosotros, that means we. The AR becomes AMOS, amos. Vosotros, which is when you are addressing a group of people informally, becomes A-I-S, ice. Now, disclaimer, vosotros is not used often at all. I would say you can just ignore this. They always make you learn it, so I'm going to include it here so you guys can be exposed to this, but nobody uses this. When you're talking to a group of people, you always use the ellos or ustedes form, which is the same, which the AR will become AN. Okay, that sounded like a lot. Let's recap. Yo, first person, AR becomes O. Tú, second person, you, AR becomes AS. Él, third person, he or she, AR becomes A. Usted, the polite version of tú, or you, AR also becomes A. Nosotros, we do something, AR becomes AMOS, amos. Vosotros, speaking to a group of people in the you form, you all do blah blah blah, you all blah blah blah. Not used a lot. AR becomes AIS. Ellos, they do something, they all do something. AR becomes AN. Ustedes, you all do something, the same thing but the polite form. This is always what is used. Always. AR becomes AN. So you have a similar thing going on with the third person and with the ellos as far as ustedes is used in both cases. So now let's just look at conjugating one verb, nadar, which means to swim. Nado, that means I swim. Nadas, that means you swim. Nada, that means he or she or usted swims. Nadamos, that means we swim. Nadáis, that means you all swim. The informal version of you all swim that you will never hear. I promise you. Nadan, they swim, or you all swim. Use this form. Okay, now what's going to get this into your head permanently is just going through examples. So let's do 3 more examples of conjugating AR verbs. Llevar. This verb means to bring or to take. I know that those sound like opposites, but it's actually the same in English. You'll say, oh, I'm not going to finish this food, take it with you. Bring this food over. Sometimes you can use take or bring interchangeably in English. I know that wasn't a great example, but I swear to God, if you think about it, you'll think of an example where take or bring is both fine in a sentence. Llevar, 2 L's. 2 L's in Spanish becomes a y sound, means to bring or to take. Yo llevo. Tú llevas. Él lleva. Usted lleva. Nosotros llevamos. Lleváis. I literally don't even know vos. It's vos. I'm so sorry. Vos. Vos lleváis. So that would be when you're using the vosotros form. No. It's vosotros lleváis. I'm so sorry. That's literally how little you're ever going to use that. Ellos llevan. Or ustedes llevan. Okay, let's go over to andar. Yo ando. I walk. Andar means to walk. Yo ando. I walk. Tú andas. You walk. Él anda. He walks. Usted anda. You walk. Polite. Nosotros andamos. We walk. Vosotros andáis. You all walk. Informal. Ellos andan. They walk. Ustedes andan. You all walk. Polite form. Use that one. Always. Even when you don't want to be polite, use that one. Because if you use this one, no one's going to understand you. Amar. To love. I'm giving you guys the good words. Yo amo. I love. Tú amas. You love. Él ama. He loves. Usted ama. Polite form of you love. Nosotros amamos. We love. We love TV. We love to eat. Vosotros amáis. You all love, informal version. Ustedes aman. You all love. Ellos aman. They love. Okay, now let's go over some examples of present form conjugated verbs in a complete sentence. Example 1. Cada día, every day, yo ando, I walk, a la escuela, to school. Every day, I walk to school. Cada día, yo ando, a la escuela. Andar means to walk. To say I walk, it became ando. The yo is not necessary here. You can have it, it's fine to have it. But because in Spanish, this word by itself gives us all the information we need. Who did it and when they did it. Therefore, the yo is not necessary if you don't want to. Without this, it would be the same. Cada día ando a la escuela. Example 2. Ella siempre toma su jugo saludable. She always drinks her healthy juice. Jugo is juice. Saludable means healthy. In Spanish, the adjective comes after the noun. So instead of saludable jugo, in English you would think healthy juice. It becomes jugo saludable. Healthy juice. Juice healthy. Tomar means to drink. Tomar, the AR became just an A because we're talking about ella. She is the third person form. We're talking about her. She's not here. She's not me and she's not you. Third person means we are talking about somebody who's not here. So she always drinks her healthy juice. Ella toma. Ella siempre toma su jugo saludable. We only have 4 examples, guys, don't worry. 3. Tú bailas mucho con Ricardo. Bailar means to dance. AS means it's the second person form. You are doing it. I'm talking to the person who is doing the verb. Tú bailas. You dance. Same thing as before. This already tells you what you need to know. So if you took out the tú, you could also just say bailas mucho con Ricardo. You dance a lot with Ricardo. Tú bailas mucho con Ricardo. You dance a lot with Ricardo. 4. Los maestros enseñan español. Enseñar means to teach. Los maestros, the teachers, enseñan, they teach, español, Spanish. Enseñan, we're talking about more than one teacher, so we're using the ellos form. Ellos means multiple people. So the AR in enseñar becomes AN. Enseñar, to teach, becomes enseñan, they teach. Los maestros enseñan español. The teachers teach Spanish. Okay, guys, I know this was a really, really long episode. That's why I didn't include the other types of verbs in this episode. It's really important for you to start learning these rules. And I promise you, once you repeat them so many times, it's going to become completely second nature to you. Good job, everybody. And we'll talk more next time.